Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rich Lyons, Dean here at Berkeley Haas, and I want to welcome you to this Dean Speakers Series we have here today. I'm delighted that all of you could join us, and I'm also delighted, I will introduce him in a moment, that Bengt could be here to my left. I also want to welcome our executive MBA students and our evening and weekend MBA students who are going to be live streaming connected to us and may have a few questions for us via the webcast along the way. And as usual, there will be plenty of time for question and answer, so please do be thinking about some of the things that you'd like to hear from our speaker. It is truly a pleasure here to welcome back, if you've seen his bio at all, you know that we are welcoming him back to Berkeley and to Berkeley Haas. He's a two-time alum, Mr. Bengt. He received his bachelor's degree from our undergraduate program. That was 1985. He earned his MBA 3 years later in 1988. In 2008, we were fortunate to have Bengt back to Berkeley. He was our commencement speaker for the MBA. That would have been May 2008. And since that time, many challenges and opportunities that he's grabbed a hold of, as well as before that. And I'll give you a little bit more on his background. So he's traveled here today from Sweden, from Stockholm. We appreciate very much that you've made this trip for us. This is obviously his alma mater, and he has a number of experiences that he's bringing here today, particularly as a global leader, right? This Dean Speaker Series brings in leaders from lots of different domains. This is one among many of the leaders that we have here who has absolutely remarkable global experience. So we will touch on that in the talk here. After graduating from Berkeley Haas, Bengt began his career as a management consultant at McKinsey. He has since spent most of his time in his professional working career with consumer brands. He started in the consumer goods industry as president of Coca-Cola Company in Sweden, and later as president of Frianor in Sweden. He also served as Nordic president of both Kodak and Stepstone, an internet-based job posting board. As director of the Nordic region for Stepstone, he helped the company expand from a 4-country base to a pan-European presence, and also helped execute a successful IPO for that company. Thereafter, he spent time in the spirits industry and worked for 7 years at Vin and Sprit, one of the world's leading international spirits companies. At V&S, Bengt also led Absolute Vodka, a brand all of you have heard about, obviously, and the 4th largest international premium spirits brand in the world. He served both as president of the Absolute division and also CEO of the whole group. In 2008, he oversaw the Swedish government's sale of Vin and Sprit to Pernod Ricard. The following year, Bengt joined Swedish-based Leaf as president and CEO. In 2012, Leaf merged with Cloetta, and Bengt was named president and CEO, and he still serves in that role today, CEO of Cloetta. Cloetta, leading confectionery company, Nordic region, Netherlands, Italy. They manufacture, market sugar confectionery, chocolate products, nuts, pastilles, chewing gum, many other wonderful things. Cloetta products are sold in more than 50 markets worldwide, 2,500 employees in 13 countries. Besides being a successful business leader, many of you likely know that Bengt also made his mark as a world-class swimmer. As a member of Cal's swim team, he earned All-American honors all 4 years. During his college career, he won 7 Pac-10 gold medals and was recognized as the NCAA Top 10 scholar athlete. Competing for Sweden, Bengt won an Olympic gold medal in 1980. And in the 100 backstroke was the gold medal, and came back to win a bronze in 84 as part of Sweden's 400 relay team. I have many questions and many things I know I can learn from you. Let all of us a warm welcome for Bengt. Thank you, Bengt. Well, what a remarkable background and set of achievements, and you bring so much energy to everything you do. Could you talk a little bit about that transition from sort of athlete to such a successful business person? Was that starting to emerge even while you were here still at Berkeley?
No, absolutely. It was absolutely crucial, and the opportunity to come to Berkeley and be able to combine swimming, which was sort of the focus when I came here as a 19-year-old, and then over time I transitioned into sort of focusing much more on getting some academic base and then moving on. As I was told already as a relatively young swimmer in Sweden, is that there are two truths when you swim in Sweden. Is one, you retire early. The second one is you retire poor. There's no pro circuits. There's none of that stuff. So the sooner you realize it, the better it is. So having this opportunity of combining the two and actually creating a platform in a new arena was invaluable to me.
Yeah.
And it also allowed me to sort of channel my energy that I had and to a certain degree still have into a new arena.
I think you do still have it, but it's that's an important message, isn't it? I mean, as you think about young people working as hard as you were in the world of sport, but then thinking about, look, there's a long cycle out there, and be ready for it. And then you went on and got the MBA. Was that so? The transition into consulting must have been a natural one for you. But what were you thinking about it in that stage of your life?
To be quite honest, it wasn't that natural. To be quite honest, I think it was a good opportunity to sort of postpone the difficult decision of which field do you really want to get into.
Okay.
So and I think that's one of the wonderful things about consulting is that you do get a breadth of challenges and experiences. You work with really bright people. You also start interacting with clients at a very early stage of your career. And you get exposed to a lot of different things. Probably earlier and a broader set of things earlier than in most other careers. So I think that was a fantastic opportunity for me to sort of get out there and say, okay, what do I really sort of thrive on?
Yeah. Do you think you could have envisioned yourself as sort of being interested in leadership the way your career has evolved even back then? These were roles that excited you?
I think it has evolved.
Yeah.
And I think in the beginning it's much more about the task. It's much more about finding a solution. Over time, it becomes more so, well, the fun part is actually setting the direction. The fun part is putting together a team.
Yeah.
The fun part is actually achieving broader results rather than me.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that has evolved over time. Then I've always wanted to be involved.
Yeah.
And have an impact.
Wonderful. Well, that's an important phrase. The fun part is putting together the team. The fun part. I'm not sure that everybody would say that, and certainly there are a lot of successful leaders that wouldn't say that, but I think a lot would, especially in this day and age, right? As we're moving away from kind of command and control organization of the economy and more toward influence beyond authority.
Absolutely.
Yeah, terrific. And the so as you think about also your sort of your brand instincts, I don't know what the quite the right word is, but you really seem to have a handle and an insight on people and their behavior and their decisions. Was that also something that evolved over time?
I've always been very curious around people. You can land me anywhere and I'll start asking questions because I think it's really interesting to find out about people's differences, experiences, because there's always something to learn.
Yeah.
And I get more frustrated with people that always provide answers and never questions because it's a bit of an arrogance, I think. And I think this whole notion about coming to new places, meeting people, it's such an opportunity to learn and add on rather than just going in your own little closed circle.
Absolutely. But I think even for the people that you're working with and who report to you, right? That kind of MO is one that they deeply appreciate, right? It speaks openness, right? It's flexibility, I think, intellectually. And Berkeley, are there things that come back to you when you think about Berkeley in the late 70s and early 80s? What are some of the associations you have?
Well, tons of memories.
Yes, yes.
I will never forget my first night arriving to Cal.
That's all the time we have. Thank you very much for coming here.
Coming in, I actually stayed in an apartment half a block off People's Park. And I traveled student class for about 30 hours, 9 hours time difference, exhausted, come in Friday night.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine had to go out to get groceries for breakfast, and a friend of mine told me that there was a 7-Eleven, but I couldn't remember whether it was left turn or right turn. And I took the right turn, which was a wrong turn for a Swede from a small city in Sweden. So I walked into People's Park in 1981. Yeah. And I came back up and said, I got to leave tomorrow. Yeah. Then I woke up the next morning, and it was a glorious day like today. And sort of balcony, I could see over the city. And I said, wow, I'll hang out a little bit longer. And since then, this place has grown. I'm one of the most avid ambassadors, I think, for Berkeley. I think it's a fantastic place. The unique combination of the multitude of people, experiences, educations, and also, I mean, the commitment to excellence, I think, is unique.
Yeah.
And also, as an international brand name, I mean, Berkeley is way beyond some other universities people talk about.
Yes. And this is one of the things that we talk about that seems to be so much a core to who you are, this notion of questioning the status quo, right? Always looking, there's got to be a better way to do this. What's the white space around this business? And that it sounds like that is one of the kind of deep elements that has always attracted you to Berkeley, huh? Yeah. And so I'm going to switch gears a little bit now. One of the things that you mentioned to me that I'd like to hear more about, you talked about, so as CEO of a company, and this notion that you've got a board of directors, you've got governance, you've got rules of the game, and I think you mentioned that you've had to grow into an appreciation for just how complicated governance is. Could you tell us more about that?
I think initially, I mean, first time you step into a CEO role, it's much about the role, and you don't really realize sort of the interaction that you have with various constituents. You think a lot about your team, your management team, and your people around you, but you don't think a lot about sort of the board of directors. And at the end of the day, that is a very, very important set of people, especially the chairman, in setting the rules of the game, also setting the limitations or allowing for the development. And unless you can convince your board, it's very difficult to move on. And that's something sort of I understood more and more as I go. So today I do my homework before accepting a new challenge. I do a lot more homework around the people, okay, who am I working with? And not only who am I working with in the organization, but also behind my back on the board. Because if I don't get that to be very productive, I'm going to be very limited in what I can do.
So you would effectively interview the board before you would ever take a job like that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll spend a lot of time with, especially the chairman.
Yeah. But you also hinted earlier at this idea that if so in the U.S. we often have CEOs who are chairmen, right? Yes. And in Europe that's a very rare thing indeed, right? So does that create a kind of perhaps mindset in Europe that the chairman knows that she or he is, look, I've got a different job than you do. My job is to do this, and so. I mean, that must kind of create, just by its very nature, a structural, adversarial is the wrong word, but you're very clearly wearing different hats. Yeah.
Very clear, and also, I mean, if you take a European board, the UK is a bit more of the Anglo-Saxon model, but outside, I mean, you will ask any board in Europe and ask, okay, what is your most important decision? And they will say it's hire and fire the CEO. That is without a doubt, and that's how they view the biggest role. And that is a difficult role to have if you're both the CEO and the chairman. So it provides a very different dynamic.
That's a good example.
And it provides a very different dynamic, which has its pros and its cons. I'm not saying one model is better than the other, but it's very, very clear that you will never mix those two. I mean, if you go to the Swedish board.
Wonderful example. So could you give us an example of a situation where you had to bring the board along, where you had a vision, there was a future state you wanted to reach that the board didn't see as quickly? And could you talk a little bit about how you got the board there?
I think the best example is actually the merger, where I had to interact with two boards. The merger of Leaf, where I was the CEO, and Cloetta. And Leaf was a private equity-owned company and had been for about 5 years. I came in after 4 years to try to exit. They didn't, and then they changed management. I came in. And then I had this idea of bringing, because it was then based in Holland, of bringing it back to Sweden and IPO it in Sweden. In the meantime, I ran into the Cloetta people, which is a chocolate company, which was not private equity. It's on the contrast. It's a trust. It's a family since 1917 that's controlled it. And trying to bring these two constituents together, first, I mean, to even meet in the same room, I mean, private equity and trust.
Very different.
And then short-term versus long-term. But then over time, people started realizing, hey, the industrial logic made all the sense with the synergies and all this stuff that you're learning about in school. But also from a governance point of view, because, okay, the family wants to stay aboard forever. Great, because private equity wants to get out. So there's no clash there. And so on. So over time, you start building, and then you start developing trust. But you need to bring it into a common agenda, a common win-win, and find the things that actually bind you together rather than pointing out. Because pointing out differences, finding 5 faults, anybody can do that. A lot of people sort of make careers of doing that. But finding the common points and actually building something, that takes time. And this took us 2.5 years. From the first meeting before we actually executed the deal, it was 2.5 years. And there were probably 4 or 5 times where we walked away from the table and said, can't be done.
Yeah.
But there's always some logic to it, and there's some value creation. Well, you can always find a way back.
And you probably were doing a lot of one-on-one selling, right? It's like every kind of selling, but yeah.
Tons of it.
Yeah.
And slightly adjust the message.
Yeah. Well, people need to hear what they need to hear. I mean, change leadership more generally, right? I mean, if the board's primary job, at least in Europe, is viewed as the hiring and firing of the CEO, I mean, you must, at some level, view one of the main elements of your job, the kind of direction setting, right? The change leadership. And has your kind of approach to getting change to happen within real organizations evolved over time?
I think today I have a greater understanding for that it takes time. It's frustrating to say because I'm not a very patient person. But it takes a lot of time. And the bigger the organization is and the broader based it is. Because you can no longer go in and look everybody into the eye and say, okay, this is why we're doing this and this is how we're going to do it. You have to sort of impact people through other people. And that takes a lot of time. That also means that you have to have a rather simplistic message. It cannot be very complex because then it will get lost in translation as it goes out. And you need to stick with it. Because many times, if I go back, I think about how quickly I have changed my tune. And when I changed my tune, it was way before people even started humming my own tune. So it becomes quite confusing. And that takes time to understand. And it's frustrating, I think, to have to accept. But you have to accept it. And once you do it, you get at ease with it. And you actually spend a lot of time trying to hold back other people that are already tired of the message and wanting to change it. So no, you stick with it. And there's a power of continuity. That's why you need to get it about 80% right. Because if you're going to hang around until you get 100% right, you will never get the simplicity. So you need to get it 80% right, and you stick with it, and then you sort of maneuver a bit.
And I guess that also speaks to sort of the best period of time over which a leader sort of leads an institution like that, right? There's some longer cycle projects or bigger changes. It's like 3, 4, 5 years is not enough. 6, 7 might not be enough, right? Yeah. Let's change gears again and go back into things like Absolute Vodka and the launch there, right? So new product, lots of key entrenched, very successful players. What was it that made that successful?
Perseverance, skill, and luck, I would say. Kind of unique story because, I mean, Absolute Vodka was in fact owned and launched by the Swedish state. They owned VNS, which was a monopoly those days. And they got a new CEO that actually came out of the political establishment who decided that he wanted to create a successful export. And they launched 2 projects. One project is actually a very successful local vodka today, but then they launched the Absolute Vodka. And they had this idea about the Swedish heritage. They put together the package, the branding, the positioning, everything. And then they went to market research, and there was not one single piece of positive feedback. Zippo. It was a wrong origin, it was a wrong taste, it was a wrong label, it was a wrong bottle, it was just wrong. But of course, the Swedish state has 100 years, so it doesn't matter, we're going to launch it anyway. So they put together a team, and actually the guy that spearheaded, Peter Ekelund, that spearheaded it here in the US, I think it was a first or second year student out of Stockholm School of Economics. I mean, his total experience, I mean, was like... And then they went looking for distributors because, as you know, probably in the US, you have a 3-tier system, so you need to find distributors. Nobody wanted to touch Absolute Vodka in 1978, 79. And then they found a small outfit on the East Coast. And then there was one person there, Michel Roux, who just fell in love with the brand for whatever reason. And he started selling it door by door, knocking door by door. And started in Boston and got somebody to hook up. And then we got a bit lucky. Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. So there was a big anti-Russian movement. And the only imported vodka at that point in time, really, was Stoli. The people looking for alternative Stoli. And Michel moved in rapidly in that.
You didn't reinforce that trend at all.
We're neutral. We're Swedes. Yeah. We're Swedes. So, but then, and that was sort of, that's why I'm saying, so perseverance was the first thing, not to sort of give up and keep on going and believe. Luck, I would say this one, and then you kick into skill. And then they started working, and then I think the whole advertising, the thinking on the communication was a lot of skill. And that was TBAW, the agency, which we worked with for 35 years after that. And they came up and they just did the first sort of creative advertising. Michelle Roux started interacting with the creative part, the fashion designers, the painters and all that. And today that is sort of part of the brand.
Yeah.
That's all creative. And the advertising didn't start until sort of 4 years after the launch. People think advertising created absolutely, but it was. And then we worked with a smaller distributor. Then as it grew, then we went into Seagram's. That was more national, global. And then we set up our own distribution ship. And then unfortunately, the state decided to sell it, which was a bit depressing. But I still think we could have built not the biggest player, but probably the second largest player in the world if we would have been allowed to. But the owner decided.
Yeah, that's right. That is true. I would just a little bit of a sideline, but one of our alums who's a venture capitalist that I was meeting with recently, he said, a class that we should include in the curriculum is, business or management from the owner's perspective, right? And the notion that, owners have a very particular view on how things should be run, right? Yes. And his view was that sometimes gets lost in the curriculum. And yeah,
because we are trained in, and we are developed in value maximization, right? Shareholder value, maximization. You know what? That's not true. For a lot of shareholders, major shareholders, it's not true. If you go back to the trust, I still have the family as a minority shareholder. Value maximization? No. The share price goes down. They think it's wonderful. They can buy more shares. Because they have a 100-year perspective. Some other people, if you go to private equity, which I spent 5 years with, it's all about shareholder value. Balance sheet, cash flow, we'll solve that. Just get the value creative ideas. So it really impacts. If you have the state as an owner, something in between. Yeah. So it really impacts, and it goes back to understanding who your shareholders are and the governance of the company, and therefore what is your agenda? What are you expected to do? When are you sort of appreciated and when are you depreciated?
Yeah. The move to confectionery and chocolate and many other wonderful things. That's what sells that product area? How does that work?
It's the most impulse-driven category I've been involved with. Nobody plans to buy. Actually, if you look at shopping list, fewer than 20% will include a confectionery item. And when it includes a confectionery item, it's because there is a birthday party or a special occasion or Easter or something. But every day, yet a lot of people walk away with a piece of candy or a gum or something in their pocket. It's all about impulse. So it's all about branding. You need to create that impulse, that urge to buy. Yes. You need to create that. And how do you do that? You need to have a brand that talks to the people forever. And as I always say, our brands have to be time machines. Because it's not about sort of the chocolate content or the fat content or the type of sugar or the percentage of this, the flavor of that. It's not really that what drives. It is this instant recognition that just gives you the urge to say, hey, you know what? I deserve that. You know what?
And it's true.
And it's true.
Yeah.
Or, wow, I have this little hunger. I need this little hunger satisfaction. You know what? This is a perfect can because I remember when I had that. And all of these brands are a little bit like friends or time machines. And when you talk about the brands of candy brands with people, you say, okay, tell me about your favorite brand in candy. They'll say X, Y. And you will always get this story. It's never because it's the best tasting candy and it contains this and more of that. Never. It's always about, you know what? I remember the first time I had this is when I went on the skiing trip with grandma, or I went to camping, or I always had that as a freshman year as Cal when I was nervous before my finals. There is always a story. Yeah. And that's what we need to do as marketeers. Yes. Make sure that we create new stories every day and that the stories are relevant. Because when the stories become too outdated, then you don't want to be associated with that anymore, right? Then it's time to move on. So you need to stay relevant, contemporize the memories. But don't mess them up. Yes. Because if you cut off the sort of the tie to the time machine, the brand is going to go south really, really fast.
Love that metaphor, the time machine. Some of you know David Reamer, and you've taken his class in storytelling, right? And I've seen him show the clip from Mad Men where he's pitching it's a slide projector, right? And the company's thinking of calling it the wheel. And he starts off and he says he's showing pictures of childhood and moms and dads swinging kids and this, and he goes through and he talks about nostalgia and this Greek friend of his, and then he concludes by saying it's not called the wheel, it's called the carousel. And the picture flashes to one of the clients, and there's tears coming down his eyes, right? And it's like, got him. Anyways, it was, but it was just a brilliant scene. It was a wonderful scene. Hey, I want to open it up. I know people have some questions. I have a bunch more, but I want to make sure that you have a chance. And as you know, we capture these on video, so it's really important that we get your voice on one of those microphones. But if you have a question for Bengt, please step up to the microphone for us. And I'm going to ask one in the interim. You can just come to the microphone and we'll capture you as soon as you're ready. When you think about sort of being a skill set called the sort of global executive or the global leader, kind of if you were in my seat, and it's kind of like we got to shape people to have a bigger global capability. What are some of the things you would put on that list? What makes someone good at global?
I think first and foremost, the realization that you have to be broader yet relevant, which sounds like a little bit contradictory. But one, you have to be clear on what you are, but you have to be inclusive. And you need to bring people on board. If you just have sort of one message hammering away and you're trying to be very, very sort of narrow and clear, I think it's difficult to become really global. Because you need to involve, you need to invite people with very different value sets. Then I think then you still need to be firm in who you are. So from core values to positioning or whatever you want to call it, you have to be very clear on who you are and why you are. Why are you relevant? What are you trying to be? Because if you're trying to be sort of mädchen för alles across the world, you're not going to be really successful.
And you're talking about the firm being clear in who it is, or the leader,
both,
the person?
Both.
Yeah.
I think the firm is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of successful, especially I'll say, take the McKinseys of the world or so. I could, after 1 year, I could move to any office of McKinsey and I would feel at home in 15 minutes.
Yes. I love those. That's a great answer. Those are important elements. Please.
Thanks so much for being here. You mentioned a lot about governance and boards and working with them. One of the things that we've talked about here at Haas is the role of diversity on boards.
Yes.
And we talk about Scandinavia as really a global leader. So I was wondering if you could share kind of insights from what it's like to be, on a forward-thinking board and kind of how the global trends are moving and kind of what are good best practices and takeaways.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are evolving. I have to admit, I'm a bit frustrated in the Scandinavian context because we tend to, diversity in Scandinavia is male and female. And to me, it's a very limiting way of looking at it. To me, diversity is looking around this campus. That to me is diversity. And also diversity is in background. So Scandinavia, typically, if you go on a board, you'll have 85 to 89% men, and at least 60% of them will have an engineering background. So, it's not a lot of diversity. It's beginning to change. And now there's a lot of sort of focus on male-female. From that perspective, I have an incredibly diversified board today because it's 50-50. And I have a woman chairperson, which I think makes me unique. I think that's the only board on the Swedish Stock Exchange that has that, which is a sad statement.
Wow.
But if you look at diversity beyond that, yes, I have a Dutch person on board that happens to be a marketeer. So I think the whole diversity thing is very, very important. But it also makes it important on how you run the agenda because it takes longer time when people come from different angles. It's very efficient and very simplistic. Everybody has the same background. You get to a decision very, very fast. So you feel efficient. And people convince each other of what's right, and it's very easy because everybody thinks the same way. If you get a diverse board, it becomes much more of a creative process. I do believe that at the end of the day, you get the better product or decision. But it's a very different process.
Yes.
And we don't really allow ourselves sometimes to take that extra time. You still run it with the 6 board meetings a year. Well, if you have a very different, maybe you need 12. Because it takes extra time to get to some types of consensus or get the best out of everybody. And here I think we're still sort of finding our ways. And here I think a lot of the sort of much more entrepreneurial, privately held companies are faster in that because they work much more informal than a publicly traded company. And all the governance that goes on in a publicly traded, I mean, if you go to the financial institutions, I mean, 80% of a board meeting is governance, which is incredible. So the creativity part is very different. So we are moving in that right direction. I think we are sometimes too simplistic in the way we view it, in our eagerness to get statistics. And we're not always willing to adjust our ways of working to get the best out of the new way.
Neat. Thanks for that question. Great question. Clark Kellogg in the back and then up front.
You mentioned earlier that you can land me anywhere and I'll start asking questions. Could you talk a little bit about the role of curiosity and empathy in shaping your success?
Well, to me, it's everything. Because if I'm going to be really brutally honest, when I was born, I knew nothing. And the only way to get to know anything is asking questions, especially if I wanted to learn something beyond what somebody else wanted to tell me. So I think that is incredibly important. And then empathy to me is caring, it's respecting people. And that to me is just so fundamental. I mean, who would I be to sort of sit on a high horse and judge other people? I'm much more curious than connect. There's always something to learn. It's really interesting, wherever you go. I mean, so to me, I think that is a crucial part in everything I've done.
Thank you.
Super. I love that phrase. Well, many of the phrases you just mentioned. But if you want to learn anything beyond what others want to teach you, it's terrific insight. Please.
Thanks for being here. Just wanted to ask, what would you say are the biggest changes hitting marketers in the next few years, or consumer packaged goods specifically?
I think we are, from a communication point of view and brand building point of view, we are at a real inflection point, which is a sort of catchphrase, but it is a major change. It's a revolution because we're going from the old model of hammering in the messages into people actually looking for messages and decisions. So what the marketeers talk about, we're moving from lean backwards advertising into lean forward advertising. Today, I watch my kids, and now in the 20s, I watch them. As soon as the advertising comes on, they flip to the next screen. When I was young, I went to the movies, and people came 5 minutes early to catch the advertising. So it's extremely different. So you need to figure out how do you make yourself interesting 365 days a year. In the old days, from an advertising point of view, you had a communication idea. It should survive 2 to 3 years, 3 to 4 flights per year on TV, radio, supported by outdoors and media, a little bit of reminder advertising. That's it. Today, you need to have something that is strong enough to actually work 365 days a year. People come to your website once, twice, 3 times a day, and they want to be surprised and they want to be entertained. Otherwise, they'll go someplace else. And that is a huge change. And for some of the big advertising agencies, it is an enormous change because their whole sort of also the payment methods, billing methods are not really built for that environment. I love it because I'm a small/medium-sized company. So I love it. We turn over about $750, $800 million. I love it because size is not the only thing that matters anymore. It's not about the budgets. It's actually about having the ideas and having sort of the most creative ways of working. So it is an opportunity for me with very local brands to compete with the big boys and girls who are trying to take a global message to fit to everybody. And what we're finding is, hey, people don't want necessarily one message to fit all. They want to interact in a somewhat unique way. And that's much easier to do today, especially with a small budget, than compared to TV a number of years ago, where production, if you look at the advertising budget for the media, it used to be what? 25% production, 75% space. Today, it's going to be 75% production, 25% space.
Well, and you mentioned that it's about the ideas. You also mentioned when we thought about board construction, this idea of sort of diversity actually brings a more creative process. They may get, a less diverse board might get to a decision sooner. Could you say a few things about what you do to get more creativity out of your organization?
One of the mantras we work with internally all the time is stop finding 5 faults.
Stop finding.
5 faults.
Got it.
And try to find one right. We have a tendency, Scandinavians are very good at this. We are very negative people to change. Right? People say, I like change. Everybody says that, they're lying. The only time they like change is when people become more similar to themselves. Then we love change. And you can just do a very simple thing. Try to brush your teeth tomorrow morning with your other hand. Now, let's see how long time you will do that. It'll take about 10 seconds, you'll give up. That's how much you like change for such a simple thing. So what happens if you come up with a new idea or a new creative way, the first thing that happens, and it takes somewhere between 7 and 12 seconds, you'll get 5 reasons why it doesn't work. We have done it before, or we have not done it before, or somebody else, or whatever reason. If you stop that and say, okay, now breathe twice and try to find one right. One reason why we should. Sometimes we can't come up with it, but many times you can say, and that's sort of the mantra. And that's not because we're doing it every time, but it's much more trying to set a mindset of,
nice.
Hey, try to find something you can build upon instead of tearing down.
Yeah.
Because if you go on the beach and you find a sandcastle, it's much easier to kick it down than to build your own. So make sure if you have something there, build on it instead of just ruining it.
And there's a lot of social science that supports exactly that process. Sometimes it gets labeled a little differently. We have a required course in the MBA program in problem framing. Problem finding, problem solving. But part of that is sort of what we talk about is divergent thinking, kind of stepping away from the problem. Don't go into kind of, critical thinking and just fire at it, right? It's like, let's give it some room.
Exactly.
And, that's terrific. Please, yeah.
Hi, my name is Stanford Stickney. I have a question. If there's one thing that you'd like us to take away, what would that be?
Work with something that gives you joy. Work with something that you actually think is fun. And don't pursue a career because your friends do it, because your parents want to do it, or because it's prestige, or because it has the best paycheck they want. So go after something with joy. That would be one. And then number 2, one thing that frustrates me is when people come out and they start their career, they are so vertical thinking. I need to move up the ladder. I need a new title. I need a new salary. Think horizontal. Go sideways. Put as many tools as you can in your toolbox before you start going vertical. Because one of my American friends told me, if your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So let's make sure we get more tools, because everything is not going to be a nail in your life. So get more tools. So therefore my advice would be get into something which you actually enjoy, and therefore you're not so eager to move up the ladder. And when you are in that area where you think it's fun to work, go sideways. Get as broad experience as possible in the beginning. You will catch up with your titles and your salaries later on.
Terrific advice. Terrific advice. When you think about the sort of, you mentioned sort of drop you and questions start, that must have served you a lot as you thought about expanding a lot of these brands internationally, huh? As you were stepping into other cultures, different people, managing different groups of people. Are there some stories that come to mind when you think about kind of jumping into different cultures as a company that, that maybe they were tough transitions or?
Launching Absolute in India was an experience beyond belief.
Yes.
I thought India was a nation. It's not. It's more difficult to get stuff between territories in India than it is actually getting it from Europe to India. And also just the sheer size. I remember we launched Absolute there, and I was supposed to be interviewed by one of the local TV channels.
Yeah.
And I asked, well, how many viewers do they have? And they had about, if I remember correctly, 120 million viewers. So, which is not very local, in my view. But just getting into that, then understanding how business is being done, understanding the people, because there is no way we're going to learn how to do business in India. So we need to find the locals who could help us. Okay, who? Well, there are hundreds of them who wanted to work with. How do you go through and get to know them? And there, I think it's a lot about getting to know the person, getting to know the values, and get beyond. It's like when I read CVs, when people send me a CV, I always read them from the back. Because in my view, anybody can get straight A's. But at the end, sort of extracurricular activities, interest, personal interest. Who is this person? Has this person done something beyond the expected? Does it have a very interesting special interest? Or is it only cooking, traveling, spending time with friends? Anybody recognize the CV? Go back, make yourself interesting. Tell me who you are. Because that's who I want to work with. I want to work with a person, an individual, not sort of a collection of statements. And that's the same thing when you go international.
Yeah.
I mean, we tried to set up we actually, after 4 years, we set up a joint venture in China. And we decided it's not going to be 49% VNS, we're going to have 51. And everybody said, it's impossible. Well, it took us 4 years and we got there. So we had a 51-49. It's all a lot about finding the right people, who you're going to work with.
Yeah.
It's about the person. So you will never let a friend down. An acquaintance or a colleague, maybe you will sort of be loyal to or not. But a friend, so make friends, make contacts, get to know people. It's networking 2.0. Networking 1.0 is getting to know as many as possible and having the most people on LinkedIn. 2.0 is actually connecting with people to me. And that, I think, is far more important than the number.
Wonderful. When you make I'm sorry, please, your turn. Yep.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is James. I'm a second-year MBA student. And throughout your career, you've likely had several mentors helping you along the way, helping you make business decisions and career decisions and so forth. And I'd love to hear your advice to someone, especially if they're going to work at a larger organization, with regards to how you go about identifying who are going to be meaningful mentors for you and how to bring them into your circle, if you will, in a way that's going to be meaningful and productive.
Great question. And I think start with what you got. I mean, go back to the people that care about you, not the people that have a gain to be made from you. So I think it's stay close to home. And I think you have plenty of mentors in your network today. That could be family, friends from high school or whatever, from sports, culture, whatever you've done. Start there. Start with the people that know you and also the people that will give you a straight answer. That sometimes will say, you know what, that is really a bad idea. Or even, you know what, you are wrong in this. And that to me is people, again, coming back to caring, that are beyond the CV or the career. It's people that do care. And that's where I would start. And then if they don't necessarily have the sort of the functional expertise or the company expertise, that's fine. Because very seldom that is the one that's going to guide you to what is the right decision. So I would start there. And then over time, you will get to know people in new arenas. That's a fun part. And that's why I'm saying go horizontal. If you go vertical, you don't meet a lot of new people. You just interact in different ways with pretty much the same people. If you go horizontal, you'll make much broader networks. And you'll get to know more people that you can ask. And then also, don't overdo it, but don't let go of people that you really cherish and that you do respect. Spend that little extra time in maintaining contact. And to me, that is, again, it's beyond LinkedIn and it's beyond Facebook. Because that to me is too often a numbers game. Care and invest time. And sometimes we invest more time in gaining new friends rather than in maintaining old friends. And I think there's more value, especially if you take quantity versus quality, there's more value in maintaining existing friends.
Do you have a system for keeping track of kind of all the things, when you think about the people you work with and their families and their kids' names and all the things that sort of express connection? Do you have a model?
No, pure personal interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
And I'm not mathematical about it. Sometimes I can sort of, it can go a long time between times and then you catch up again.
Yeah.
But I'm not very mathematical about it. I'm much more emotional about it.
Very natural. Yeah. Well, that's good. And how about the question I was going to ask is I think you answered this, but when you think about like a senior team member, okay, so you've got this is a big decision for you. Are there certain particular things beyond what the wonderful things you've already said that you would say, I really need that in a senior team member, in a deputy?
Drive. Always energy and drive. I mean, leading is draining, and it's it's hard work in a mentor because you can never turn off. I mean, you never leave work.
No.
I mean, you get into CEO or a very senior position, you never leave work. It is always ongoing, and you're always also, I mean, as a leader, not necessarily as a manager, but as a leader, you should always be open for incoming calls. And one of the things if you're running a global business, I mean, that means somebody's always awake somewhere in the world. So there will be incoming calls. So to be able to have the stamina of dealing with that, you need drive.
Yeah.
And drive to me comes from joy and interest. I'm doing something I want to do, not something I'm doing because people told me to do. So for me, I mean, energy and drive is huge. Then skill set, I mean, there's a lot of skill set that are relevant sort of experiences out there. That's not the difficult part when you're recruiting. Find the drive, and then also finding the person that will add something to the team.
Yeah.
Beyond the meeting rooms, beyond this sort of functional expertise, something that will sort of add something to the equation. Because you want to be, it's a tough world out there.
Yes, it is. And then, you know, part of drive or stamina is just the pure physicality of it, right? Look, if you're not taking care of yourself, it's not going to be sustainable, right? I remember this was a long time ago, but I had a job interview and somebody asked me, you know, how often I work out. And I thought, wow, that's a crazy question. But it was like, well, look, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you won't be able to do this job, not the way we would need you to do it, right?
For a long time.
Wow, exactly, right? And that's, those are eye-openers when you hear questions. It starts to sound, well, that's pretty personal, isn't it? It's like, no, this is the job, and this is what it's going to take. Yeah. Please.
Thanks for being here. My name is Wilson. I'm an undergrad, and I was wondering, I mean, for my own experiences and the experiences of a lot of my classmates, competition is a huge part of your life at Berkeley. I was wondering if you'd maybe share or elaborate some of your takeaways in being in competitive environments and, you know, not necessarily how to win, but, you know, what's your approach or attitude that you take on when you're competing?
Quite straightforward. To me, is winning is not beating somebody else. Winning is attaining your own goals. So you need to know where you're going, not where everybody else is going. And too many times, and I think that is very much, I mean, how I'm sort of trained from sports. It's okay, and I was in an individual sport with the clock, so it was easy. I could win even if I got dead last. I could win because I had an aim to go a certain time. And I think that has really fostered my thinking. And I think that's important because it's really, I mean, when I came out to Berkeley, I mean, I was blown away about, I mean, the level of talent and the smart people. When I started in McKinsey, I mean, I was like, woo, I was terrified day one. I mean, everybody's at least as twice as smart as I am. And they're at least as hardworking as I am. And so at the end, okay, now, why am I here? What do I think I can contribute? Okay, this is what I want to achieve. This is what I want. This is why I'm here. So that's what I'm going to track myself against. Not whether Joe or Lisa is doing it much better or faster. Not really. And I think that takes a little bit of pressure off. And it also allows you to take it within your own control. I think the most frustrating thing is when it's beyond your control, when it happens to you. That's when it really gets sort of nerve-wracking. And you're trying to block and say, okay, oh, now this happened. Oh, now that happened. No. You need to go within your own control. Okay, what am I here for? Well, I want to do this. I want to learn that. I want to experience this. That's how I would approach it. And then the most important thing there is, celebrate success. We are horrendous at that. We are really good at getting miserable when we don't succeed. And we love to tell our friends when we're not succeeding. Oh, Jesus, I flunked this, I flunked that, I got a C or a D or whatever. But celebrate success. There's nothing that gives more energy than celebrating success. Just look at sports. I mean, how many other areas would you see 300-pound men hug each other? NFL. Celebrate success. And that's also extremely important in organizations.
No, it is.
We are way too bad. I mean, we're trying to do it, but we're still abysmal at it. We need to celebrate success because that's energizing. The winner, have you ever noticed sports? The winner is never tired. The guy finished second or the girl finished third, always falls across the finish line. They fall down and they're tired. Number one, it's just a joy and a smile. You think they work less hard? No, they're celebrating success.
Terrific. We have time for just a couple more questions, please.
Alfonso, I'm a first-year MBA student. At the beginning, you mentioned how important it was for you to have an impact, and I think that's a phrase very common in Haas students. But when you start asking what's impact for everyone, I think we struggle to define what's really impact for every one of us. So my question is, what's impact for you today when you look at having a career that has an impact somewhere? What's impact for you, and how did you found what that meaning was in your career?
It has evolved. I mean, to me, having impact at the beginning, my first study at McKinsey, I wanted to make sure at least one of my charts made it into the final presentation, right? At least one. I mean, come on, I work 8 hours a week here. I mean, at least one should make the cut, right? That to me is impact. And I felt incredibly proud sitting there. Well, one made it to the client, right? I'll do another 80 hours the next week, and maybe I'll get in 2. That's how it started out. Then it becomes much more so, well, I can influence the direction of my department. And then it becomes much more, I can influence the direction. And today, I mean, my biggest impact, what I get most joy is impact on people's development. I love when people give me a call that I worked with 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, or 8 years ago. Say, hey, guess what? I'm doing this and this now, and thank you for helping me in this area. I've had a couple examples. I mean, I have a couple examples where I've actually fired people, but for the right reasons, because they were in the wrong place for the wrong reasons, not because they were bad people. And I still have a very good relationship with them today. They've moved on. That gives me energy. That to me is impact. Because if you are in the wrong place, actually the most humane thing I can do is not to keep you there. It's actually to move you. Then I need to be very, very clear on why and how and where I think you should go, and give you the support in that direction. So to me, it evolves. So I started out with the one chart, that was impact, and today I think it's fantastic just being able to sort of influence people's career choices.
And as you know well, especially in this generation, but forever, it's humankind, right? Having a boss that is actually developing, not you and your career is a profoundly valuable thing, and deeply appreciated, and creates the kind of commitment that makes organizations thrive. So there's so many things. I've taken a bunch of notes myself. I will tweet some of them with attribution, I promise. But let me just offer a couple of quick things that were in my notes to conclude here. You know, being inclusive, to be global, right? That notion was really a wonderfully powerful one. Being firm in who you are as a person, as an enterprise. It's about having the ideas. One that's, we are part of Silicon Valley, sort of the ideas as the root source of where economic and social value comes from. It's got to be, that's the engine room, right? So I fully subscribe to that, and so does this school. Think horizontal, incredibly important, and why am I here? The question of right, with all these terrifically capable people, and we each of us does have something to offer, and we have to find it. Bengt, Baron, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.